a whimsical style, a lot of influences from the brothers Grimm. It was supposed to be more on this dark side of human nature. Hi guys, it's April. I'm gonna do this review the same way I do all of my other reviews. I'm gonna have the non-spoiler section up front, followed by all the spoiled-filled words afterwards, because there are always things that I need to talk about, but I don't want to spoil it for people who don't want to be spoiled. Now, I will say I received a copy of this book from NetGalley and the publishers for a free and honest review, but that has in no way swayed my opinion of this book, but I thought I'd let you know that beforehand before I start getting into the rest of this review. So The Grimm Sisters by Menna van Praag is the story of 4 girls, Goldie, Liana, Scarlett, and Bee, who are about to turn 18. Each of them are starting to notice certain weird, odd events happening around them and certain affinities for elements that they have. Each of them have grown up with a past that isn't the greatest. They've had to deal with a lot of things really young in life, but unbeknownst to them, they are being hunted, and on their 18th birthday, they have to choose between the light and the dark. This story is told in a very whimsical style. It floats back and forth between the past and the present and in between each of the 4 girls, plus a few additional characters as well. It is nice to see all of those different perspectives, but sometimes the writing suffered a little bit for it because those changes were so jarring. A lot of times it changed from 3rd-person perspective to 1st-person perspective and back and forth like that, and that was a little off-putting at times, especially if you're not ready for it. I did also like all of the fairy tale elements that were woven into this story. Each of the girls had some kind of fairy tale influencing their life in some way, and overall the story had a lot of influences from the brothers Grimm, so I did like that as well. It did suffer a bit with the lore in the story. There were a lot of things happening and a lot of depth to the magic and the universe that was going on. However, there were choices made that weren't explained that just felt very uncomfortable. It was set up in a way that I think it was supposed to be more on this dark side of human nature, and there was a lot of choices and setup that happened that didn't have a rhyme or reason behind it. It just was, especially the big bad in this story. A lot of the time I wanted to know why things were the way they were, not just that they were the way they were. There was a lot of rules in place that didn't have a lot of backstory, and because of how the story was set up, I wanted that backstory. It was nice to see the differences between all of the girls and how they were all dealing with life and how their lives intertwined with each other. And overall, it was one of those reads that if you did not pay attention, you were gonna miss a lot of the nuances. It was definitely a slower, meatier read, which I liked. But like I said, there were a few elements in the story that I didn't like and I couldn't get behind, and I didn't understand why those things happened. And then the climax of the story was underwhelming to say the least, and things just petered out from there. So I liked the build, I did not like the drop off. But if you do like fairy tale reimaginings, and if you do like darker, grittier style reads, you will probably like this book. But now I will get into some spoiled-filled thoughts, so if you don't want any of those spoilers and you want to go off and read it and come back, I completely understand, but otherwise, just leave a comment down below if you're going to read this book, because I would love to know. And then, of course, come back and we'll talk about it. I mentioned in my non-spoiler section that there were some choices made in this story that I did not understand, and I really wanted to know why. And the biggest one was Wilhelm Grimm, the father of all of the Grimm sisters. The uncomfortable, incestuous relationships between everything that I'm really uncomfortable with, especially given the fact that the Grimms are part of my average reading. I didn't understand why we made Wilhelm Grimm demon, if that was what he was, or just really bad. See, that's another whole thing. They built up this whole concept between light and dark. They made Wilhelm Grimm dark and a guy who just makes a bunch of women pregnant because he wants the daughters, but he sets his sons up against the daughters because he wants them to be on his side, and if they're not, then the stars, the fallen stars, apparently they're fallen stars, which is another name for a demon, so I can see how they're towards the dark. There were a lot of competing unknowns that I kind of wanted mapped out that wasn't mapped out. I'm okay that you made Wilhelm Grimm evil. dark, not necessarily evil, dark. But why? And is this the original Wilhelm Grimm that did the fairy tales? Or is this just some guy, some demon, some dark dude who decided to call himself Wilhelm Grimm and play out all of this stuff? And then you have these fallen stars that have to take the life force of the Grimms and other human beings just to stay alive. But why? Why do stars fall? Do they get yanked out of the sky? Does Wilhelm Grimm yank them out of the sky and that's why he's got so much control over them? And why on the 13th year do the girls stop coming to the Everywhere and the boys start being able to come to the Everywhere? Is that a rule that was set up by Wilhelm and he can control it that way because he seems to have all of these magical mystical powers? Or is that just something that the Everywhere set up? Is that something that changed after Wilhelm Grimm died? I did like how all of the fairy tales were expanded upon and changed and made a little bit more realistic for the time that we live in. There was something very magical and real about that I really, really liked. At the beginning when I started reading it, I didn't really associate their names with different fairy tales, and it was as I was reading it that I'm like, oh, Goldie is probably related to Goldilocks and Scarlet, Red Riding Hood. I don't know why. We always have Scarlet as a Red Riding Hood character. It's something about the red, I guess. Especially since her mom was called Ruby. That's kind of fun too. I struggled with the whys. I needed the whys. And I know that wasn't the reason of this book, but I struggled a lot with the whys. I wanted to know more, and I think that was my biggest thing. So tell me down below what you thought about this book. I would love to hear your thoughts. It was one of those reads that I struggled with a little bit, but I managed to get through and I enjoyed parts, but there were other parts that were just like, but why? And of course, as always, if you want to stay up to date with every time I upload, subscribe down below, and I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.